Hello, hello. We're so happy today because we have a special guest, and I think Eliza should introduce our guest because I'm gonna butcher your name,
Fellow
Matt.
fellow Canadian, Matt DesLauriers. Oh yeah, you always say that you can't say his name. Of course you
No,
can.
I can't say.
Yeah. How
Check
do you
this
say it,
out.
Matt?
DesLauriers.
DesLauriers.
You see,
DesLauriers.
Yeah, it's
and
DesLauriers.
I
actually
say
perfect.
DesLauriers, so it's like.
But that's because you say it the Spanish way, I suppose. That's
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
Okay.
always, when I first
DesLauriers.
met you, I was sure you were like a pure Quebecer, and then you were
Yeah,
like,
I
nope.
get a lot of that,
Yeah.
or French. So sometimes I'll have like clients email me in total French, and I'll have to like reply to them, be like, actually, like I'll put it through Google Translate just to make sure I'm not like misunderstanding what they're trying to ask, and I'll be like, yeah, it might not work out.
That's funny.
So why don't you introduce yourself for the people today, the chat
Tell us
that
about yourself.
maybe don't
Okay.
know who you are, like where are you from? I mean, we were just stating that you're from
Talking.
Canada, but you can tell us where you grew up and a little bit like that.
And like, I
So
would love to also know how you got into coding because you're like pretty epic as a dev, programmer, engineer, however you want to call yourself. So like, how did it start?
yeah,
Tell us all
so
the things.
I born in Toronto, Canada. And I've been really into code and computers and programming since like I was really young. I think in high school is when I kind of started getting into it. I like took a couple programming classes and I felt like they were, I don't know, it felt kind of natural and I got really into it and I'd like just spend my free time like learning the stuff and like pretty quickly like the teacher of the class wasn't a great programmer and he was like, I don't understand what you're doing and like you're on your own type of thing.
That's awesome.
Um, and yeah, I just kind of kept with it. And most of the time, what I was exploring was like 3D stuff or like game related or graphics programming or
Right out
kind
the
of doing
gate
like,
in high school? Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
So like
Wow.
I started learning with Java and that was like a
Yeah.
horrible experience, but I didn't
Yeah.
know any better. I just thought, oh, this is what programming is. And
hmm
so I was looking for like how to make games and stuff and how to do, visual related things. And I found something called lWJGL, which is like a lightweight Java, I think, a graphics library or something like that.
Okay.
And
I
it's
don't know
basically a
this.
wrapper around OpenGL ES. And so OpenGL is kind of like the original
Yeah.
WebGL. Like WebGL is just
Yeah.
like built on top of OpenGL. And so it was this like really bare bones wrapper around like just OpenGL, and I was like, yeah, this is how people make games. This is all I could find at the time. So I like spent like days just like making a triangle on the screen, and like that's all I was
Wow.
able to do. But eventually I found other stuff. Like I found this library called Slick2D, which was like a nice like 2D drawing API for Java and like making games and stuff. And I got like really into that. And then eventually I started to like realize there was other
Mhm.
stuff like this other thing called libgdx. There was a lot of different like things I was just exploring over the years in high school and as I was growing up. And then
Super early, I will say.
after it,
Yeah.
what's that?
Super
So
early,
early to
very
dive
very
into that
early.
so deep.
Yeah, I was lucky in that I just like started right away with shaders and stuff like that, which yeah. So
Do
eventually
you have
I
a
sort of
flash phase?
I kind of,
Okay.
because when I was in university, I was trying to find more courses that were like game related or programming related. I studied film and media, which was kind of like a bit off what I wanted to do,
Like
really, I
me.
guess, or
That's
what
so
I.
funny. I didn't know that.
Mhm.
Cool.
But it was kind of like I realized most of my time I was spending just coding instead of actually like going to class or focusing on film and media stuff.
Mm.
And so yeah, eventually I had this course on game programming, and I think the teacher might have said to use Flash, or maybe that was just me at the time trying it out. And I did some like 3D ridiculous racing game where you're a rubber duck in a bathtub trying to like race against time
Wow.
with Flash and stuff like that. So like just like little things like that, and that's what I sort of experimented with. Anyways, after university, I got into more web-based stuff like JavaScript and WebGL and stuff like that because I
Yeah.
started in an agency in Toronto where they originally were using Flash, and then they had to migrate over to WebGL and stuff like that once Flash started to die.
Ah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And so I was their and I was their lead like creative developer for a few years. And then after that, I went more towards my own like freelance kind of direction, I guess, just going more and more towards generative art. And now that's kind of all I'm focusing on is just generative art and making art with code and things like that.
Cool. Cool. By the
Yeah, so
way,
that's like the short story.
yeah, no, super interesting to hear that. I think since very early, I must say that you were like even when
Yeah.
you didn't learn to code like at school with a degree, but you like start exploring so early, and like you were saying,
I
spending a
mean,
lot of time.
yeah.
So
I think it's cool that you like really followed your curiosity that way. I remember being into like coding silly websites and Angel Fire and stuff like that, and then dropping off for a couple of years and then coming back and just CSS was already, I was like, what is, ooh, this is weird. I think I missed I missed a wave and now I can't get back on the wave. Um, but wait, I just had a thought. Last time I saw you, you were in Paris and we were talking about NPM and they had contacted you to tell you wrote like I can't even remember, like a huge chunk of the package is actually on there. Do you know how many resources you've created? Like actually, do you have a number?
Mm,
So I feel like you
I don't know. At one point,
service.
I feel like it's pretty small scale compared to what other people on NPM are doing because there's some like power developers that are like pumping out amazing libraries on NPM and like maintaining them, whereas
Mm,
I'm not really maintaining the libraries that I'm creating, but I think I've got like 600 repositories or something.
that's wild.
And
To me,
it's
that's
it's
wild.
but I sort of imagine it more like a paste bin or something where
Okay.
I'm just like putting my open source code up there and sometimes I'll maintain it, but lately I haven't really been doing that very well, I guess, just because it's a bit overwhelming to have like that many repositories and then have to receive emails from every single one of them that's like people are like, "Oh, you made a typo on this
Oh,
README." And I'm
yeah.
like, "Oh my God,
No.
like
Just make a,
this
yeah,
yeah,
is
just,
literally an
very
email that I
common.
had to open up to read with 600 repos, you get a lot of that.
that's a
And
lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, but then there's also a lot of like legitimate issues and a lot of the time I look at it and I'm like I I could spend my day fixing this or I could wait, a few months and most likely the person will either give up or they'll find a solution
Mm,
and it's not like the end of the world, I think. If,
no, for sure.
my one module about interpolation or something like that doesn't work, like somebody can figure out something
And
else.
can
I
figure out their
think
own
so. I
workaround.
think
Yeah,
so.
for sure.
I
Yeah.
always think that
You're,
it's
Yeah.
overwhelming for people that has like big popular repositories and then a lot of like incoming questions or issues like,
yeah.
and then on
How do
top
you,
of that,
yeah.
this like everybody has like a job or a life, so it's not like your life is the repo. So people should I don't know, should learn to be patient if they ask for something, so
I
that
think
is not the
so.
Yeah.
main job unless it's like a company's
Yeah.
repo, so that really the company is working fully on that. By the way, Eliza, can you lower your gain a little bit
You want
again
me to lower
because
it? Okay.
some people or like yeah, one person was
Okay.
saying yeah,
I
just a
went
little
back
bit,
down
just a
one.
little bit.
Okay. Cool. You're
Cool.
getting a lot of love in the comments too, and people are shouting at Canvas Sketch. I love
So
Canvas
that a
Sketch.
Canvas sketch is like a one that I try and maintain a little bit better. Lately, I've been a bit busy. I haven't really been focusing on it, but I'm still using it like every week in my own workflow. So it's the kind of thing where like if there was to be like a massive issue with it, I would probably be fixing that pretty
Yeah.
quickly. But some of the other modules I've written, some of them I wrote like years ago and I wrote them for a very specific application or something like that.
Yeah.
And instead of just keeping it private, I just decided to like post
I was about
the
to ask about that,
code.
that all of the tools that you've built mostly has been because basically you needed them, right? It wasn't like, oh, I want to create this for the people, but it was more like if you were focusing or working on a project, you decided to make it
Yeah,
and
you
then just
solve
put
your
it there, right?
problem with a tool. Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. I guess most of the time it would be because I needed it. Um, yeah, I guess that's basically it. There's probably a few where I was like, I want to try and solve this problem just for the sake of solving it. I don't know. Like at one point I did like a a GIF encoder, but I guess I needed that kind of as well. But like I wanted a better GIF encoder for client side stuff. So like so far there's like a few other GIF encoders, but they're kind of slow or like they have different problems that I wasn't, so I wasn't really happy with them. So I ended up like spending like a week writing like a GIF encoder. And it's way faster and it has like more features and stuff like that. It's not, it's the same thing with all my other repos where I think I have some issues piling up in it and I'm, just kind of politely ignoring them. But at some point I might go back and fix that and we'll see. But the code is there and it's MIT. So if people want to, if anyone actually wanted to like become a maintainer of that, they could fork that and deal with it themselves.
Yeah, cool. So, should we jump a little bit on the shader?
Yeah, so what did we want to
see.
do today? You had a very specific idea. I think I tweeted it out.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, I don't know, like I guess I just want to do really basic stuff, but I'm probably going to end up making it more complicated than it needs to be. But in terms of basic, I mean like just grids, maybe some circles, maybe some like different color space stuff like HSV or OKLAB, and then maybe a few other things around like the nitty gritty of like how I sort of approach some of these shaders. And so a good example is like anti-aliasing, which is something that I'm like super focused on in a lot of these kind of projects that I'm doing, because a lot of the work that I'm doing, I'll print it like really big.
Yeah.
And so if there's any like little jagged edges, then I'd feel kind of I'd see that in the print and I'd be like, oh, that's a jagged edge. And so I'll spend like literally hours like making sure that the lines are like smooth on the edge.
Yeah.
So these are like little things that I'll probably be talking about. And then also I'm going to talk a little bit about like some of the basic ways of like saving out this work. It is just like a slightly different setup for resizing the canvas so that you can like save it for like print resolution images and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I love that
But
because nobody has
too.
come and teaches that, for example,
Yeah.
or not even us alone, because sometimes we stream alone and we haven't even explored that. So
yeah,
it's exciting to do something different today. So
yeah. Also, I would say because I'm just going to be doing really primitive graphics like circles and lines, it's probably actually like a horrible use case for shaders, especially because I'm going to end up just doing them as like static images. Maybe I'll turn on the animation here and there and we can like see what it looks like animated. But I would say this is more of like an experiment or like learning some of the stuff rather than like me trying to be like, you should draw a circle with a shader, because it's way easier just to use like a Canvas 2D API and like literally write one function that says draw circle. But hopefully we'll learn some cool stuff. So
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. So yeah.
So should we jump into the code here?
Yeah. Tell us where.
And everybody, I can see Alethya's cursor. Can you guys see me?
Yeah.
I don't see you, Matt.
See me now?
Yeah.
Sort of. I can.
I'm in the
Captain
shader.
Anonymous. You're Captain Anonymous. Okay.
Ooh, Captain Anonymous. I like it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, maybe I need to actually should I log in?
If you log into CodePen, then your name will appear, but you don't have to if you don't want to.
Exactly, it's up to you. You can be Captain Anonymous during
how about
the
now?
stream.
You see me now?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Oh wow, that was fast. I always think that it might take some time for people to log in, but it's a fast thing.
Someone in the chat is asking, is it still a lot faster to do a circle with a shader than with HTML Canvas? Faster?
What do you mean by faster?
I mean faster in that maybe the way that shaders generate graphics is like faster than.
That's what I was thinking of the question, like.
But then is it really faster? Because like it's probably easier to do it in Canvas. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it'll run faster. Maybe it'll be very efficient, but it'll definitely take a lot longer.
Yeah.
So I would say what we're going to be doing is probably not like basically if you like learn the stuff that we're doing today and you start to apply it, you're probably not going to apply it in the same way that we're doing it today, where you just draw a circle. But you might learn a lot of things around like some of the little like inner details that I'm going to focus on, and maybe that'll be useful, let's say if you're using WebGL and you wanted to draw lines, or you wanted to draw like a certain texture on a mesh or something, and you wanted that mesh to be like really crisp, anti-alias or something like that. That's where you might use some of the stuff that we're going to do today, even though right now, today, we're just drawing circles and lines.
Cool.
That sounds perfect.
So the first thing that I always do whenever I'm in a shader, so here's our shader, is I always basically start with like a fresh state where there's a UV coordinate, and it goes as like a gradient from like 0 on one side of the screen to 1 on the other side, and then the same thing for the vertical.
Okay.
So like, let's say here we have this UV coordinate, and I'm just going to take out the time. And then what I also do is I just, let's say we can use this. So I also just start with like black and white instead of trying to go straight for color. And so like here we have like just this value. It should work. Yeah. So let's say, let's call it D. And this is also kind of how you end up debugging shaders, I find, is like the only way you can really console log or print is by just like visualizing it.
Yes.
And so this is pretty much like my starting point whenever I do stuff. And one thing we'll notice here is that on the left of the image, it's black, and on the right of the image, it's this gray, whereas it should be 1 if we wanted to go from 0 to 1. So probably what's happening here is that it's like going from -1 to 1 or something like that. But what I'll just do for now is just modify this, something like that. And I think it still looks like it, well, let's see. So it looks like it might be going from 0 to 1, but one way to test to see if it is just to write a step function like this. Just to make sure that like the UV coordinate is correct.
In the middle.
Yeah, so
which it is.
exactly. So this step function is like, if this x value is greater than 5, draw 1. If it's less than 5.5, draw 0 for black. And so now let's say what we want to do. We have this like proof that it's, let's also just double check on the y-axis. Make sure it's, yeah, exactly. So let's say what we want to start with is like a simple grid. Sometimes also when it comes to like, what do you actually draw? What kind of like graphics should you be creating with the code? Like sometimes it's kind of overwhelming just to look at code and like an empty surface and like try and come up with some, artwork or try and come up with like an idea. So like quite often I'll just like dive into Pinterest. So like if you want, I can share my screen and just show like a Pinterest board that I've got.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, please.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Do that. Or can you send me a link?
Allow it.
Or is it private? This thing?
It's private.
Okay, then
So what
share
would be
it.
the best way? Can I share a tab maybe? There we go. Can you see this tab that I've got shared?
Yeah, but hold on. It's gonna take a second because I need to update OBS so people can see. Give me a second. There, for a second, I'm just gonna put us on the whole screen so they can see. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, lately this has sort of started in like lockdowns with COVID and stuff, but I started researching color theory a lot and trying to just understand it a bit better. And like as I was researching like just color theory and like reading some books and some papers and stuff on color theory, like a lot of times like these kind of graphics would show up, and they were kind of inspiring, even though it's like really simple, just like circles and like shapes and stuff. And I don't know, there's just something about this that I felt like there's this kind of nice system, and it's kind of interesting, and it's primitive shapes. So I thought it would be like a good starting point. So this is kind of how I
love that you're sharing this process, to be honest, which hasn't been shared here often, like when you have to come up with shaders. Cool. And this is one thing that I have to say that I've been asked sometimes on socials, like how do I come up with ideas for example, the any day shaders that I do so often, like, oh, I have people message me, and oftentimes I do kind of like you, a mood board. Like
Really? You do that too?
yeah, this is, but this
Cool.
is, I don't know if maybe you do this too, Matt, because you as well, I know that you didn't, or I guess you said film and communications. I don't know if you, part of your studies was design, but I was a graphic designer before I was coding before, like I was doing print work. And then you learn kind of like when you have to come up with concepts, because I didn't go to the science school, that you have to make a mood board whenever like you have to come up with ideas of things.
Hmm.
So I use it still in my process when I have to come up with things, because it helps you to be inspired, right? So because as
Like, how
creators, you
specific
cannot
do you
come
guys
from
get?
zero. So
How specific do you guys get? Because whenever I make mood boards in the past, and then I have this really specific idea in my head, and then if I can't make it exactly how I see it, I get so annoyed. So then I kind of like moved away from doing that because it was too frustrating.
for me, it's just an
Well, I mean,
inspiration, kind of like a match show here, like just a bunch of
hmm,
stuff, and to kind of like get me inspired into what I want to do. But it's not necessarily because I want to kind of create something that I saw there, but just like
Mm.
to put it in my head around the idea that I might have or might not have, and see what comes up. At
hmm,
least that's on my part. I don't know. How about you, Matt?
yeah, like I have a lot of different boards actually, and I use Pinterest a lot. And usually my process for like using Pinterest is to start with like I'll start looking at like let's say one image, and I'll be like, ah, there's like one little thing I like about that, where it's like these little tiny hash marks, and together they make up this kind of nice texture. And then I might just like go down and see like what other things there are. I might, put this in a board, and I might be like, this one's kind of cool, put this in a board. And then like I start opening up like literally hundreds of tabs, and each of them I might save and then go down and through and like find related things. And it's this kind of, I don't know, it's this kind of process where like you kind of have to like empty your mind a little bit and just like kind of go with the flow, and like just like, opening up these things and getting like little snippets of it, and
Mm.
not trying to find like a specific direction, I think, just trying to find like an overall like, you know, sort of feeling that you want to convey. I think that's maybe a better way to think of it.
Cool.
But then there's a certain point at which, like, if I do it for too long, I start to kind of like what you're saying, where you start to expect a certain direction in a really specific way, and then anything you do, you feel like you're not going to hit it. So like
Yeah.
that's why like the boards, I have to like eventually stop pinning, and I have to stop looking at Pinterest and like start coding.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just spend too much time doing it. So like this color theory one is like kind of a good example. It's just like, 20 pins or something. And then after that, I'm like, all right, time to just like absorb all of this into my brain without
Mm.
actually looking at any specific one.
Hmm.
And just try and create something that like conveys a similar feeling. So
Cool.
that's kind
Okay.
of like my approach to that. And so that just is kind of like to start us off. And the first thing that I feel that a lot of these um, sort of images convey is this like sense of like obviously this circle of color, but also this feeling of like old paper. And this is kind of a different direction than what I was just showing in the Pinterest board. But like when I think of like these old paper, and when I think of like these color systems, and when I think of like sort of how it all comes together, I sort of am also reminded of like graph paper and like grid paper. And so I think it would be kind of fun just like to start with like, instead of it just being a plain solid color, we start with like a solid color that has like a grid. And
I'm
then on
into
top of
it.
that,
Yeah.
we can put on like the color wheel or something like that. So
Cool.
like the first thing we'll do is just like lines to make a grid, and that'll actually end up being kind of useful when we start doing like the color wheel and stuff like that, just because we'll have gone through some of the basic concepts. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Mm.
so here we are in the shader. And if you look in the shader, I'm just doing the step function, and let's go on the horizontal uh, direction, the
Hmm.
x-axis. And let's say what we want to do is we want to make it so that eventually we have this kind of beige paper with like a bunch of thin black lines to make up a grid, so that
Hmm.
it's kind of like a graph paper, as if it's like a starting point for us to do some like cool color circles and stuff on top of.
Mm.
And to do that, we're going to use what's called the
Frack?
fract function.
You knew
Yeah,
Yeah,
my favorite
it.
one.
exactly. And I'm just going to define a new variable, let's say called repeats.
Okay, wait though. Tiny shout out if people are
Yes, I
seeing
was about to.
the little debug messages that pop up occasionally. That's thanks to Sean Zelmer, who was so kind and created a debugger especially for us for the stream.
That's very
So,
helpful.
yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. So here we are. So what I've just done is I've just set it so that there's this fract function, which anything you put into it, instead of giving me back 10 times the value, it's just going to give you back the decimal point. So let's say we were to do fract 15, what we would get back is 0.25. And it's no matter what this whole value is, we're always going to get back whatever the decimal value is.
Cool.
So this is what fract is doing here. And so I'm just going to pull this out into its own sort of, let's call it X.
Wow, the debugger is so, I must say,
it's so good.
Yeah,
I love
it's
it.
so
I know.
good. We've
like,
never
wow.
had this before, so it's the first time trying
First
it.
time we
Nice.
use it, yeah.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
So the next thing I want to do is, let's say, yeah, so one thing I kind of want to explore, and this is, let me just try and see if this works actually before I do it, because I haven't done this in a little while. Because one thing I'm noticing here is, like, if I go to, let's say, 50, what ideally we'd like to do is make it so that these black lines are really thin, and then there's like more space between them. So like we can change this here, the threshold in the step function.
Okay. Yeah, because I was gonna say that it's in the step function that you need to do that.
Yeah. There we go. So that's kind of a start. Starting to look like part of a grid, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
One other thing that's kind of annoying me, and this is like maybe just me being annoyed by this, but if you're able to see it, I don't know if you're able to see it.
The
but
lines are not like perfectly the same, right? So is that what's bothering you?
Well, that's one thing that's bothering me for sure. And when you resize your browser and when you resize the thing, you see they're all kind of different sizes. That's kind of annoying. But also kind of annoying is that, like, if I was to make this a bit bigger, let's say I make this a different color so that instead of it being black, it's like red. So yeah, so what you see is the edge here on the right of the edge on the right of the image is red, and the edge on the left of the image is black.
Center.
Yeah, so like this is the kind of stuff that I'm going to be focusing on today. It's super
I love
interesting.
I never.
It's very designer focus, I would say, this session.
Yeah. So
but these are the details that I'm always like, it's fine. But I love it. I just never know how to solve these problems, so I try to not think about them.
Yeah.
I'm excited to.
So this is, let me just see if this will work or not. I'm just going to try it, and if it works, then good. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
So what I've just done is I've just sort of centered it so that, there we go, so that it's not, or it shouldn't be, at least. Let me just try. I'm going
to make less lines to see it more clearly. So
yeah. Or maybe I didn't fix it.
Wait.
Is it though? For me, there's still black on the left and red on the right.
Me too.
I'm confused.
Yeah, me too. Oh wait, no. What did you do?
No, it's
still. I just changed the.
For me,
it's still red.
Oh, it's because the. It's because
you're getting thrown off by
the
code pen, the bar. Yeah. If you put the code on the bottom or on the top, you'll see it. Oh wait, no, okay, wait. I just put the code on top, and now it's like
for me,
not
it's right.
centered, but not centered. There's like a little bit of red on the right and on the left, but more on the left.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyways, let's just ignore what I was doing before. I'm sure there's a better way to do it, and I'm just going to go back to having it as it was. Because I'm looking at my like notes from what I wrote before, and I had some code like that, and I can't remember why I put it there. But we'll probably fix that later at some point. So the next thing to do, let's say, to complete this grid, which we have these like thin black lines. We need to obviously do the same thing in the other direction. And what we'll do is we'll combine these two step functions together. Let's see if this works or not.
It should. Yay.
Yeah,
Ooh,
so it does.
cool.
Mhm.
Now, there's a few issues, depending on your browser, depending on how you're configured it and stuff like that. The first issue might be, well, the first issue is that it's like these black lines on red. So let's just make it so that it's like black lines on white. And the way we'll do that is actually a bit of a weird way, but you'll see later why I'm doing it this way. We're going to use a mix function, and we're going to go from white to black. And I might need to switch this around. Let's see.
No, I think you're right. It's interpolation, so it can
Or
be
I could go the other
further.
way around. So start with black
Mm.
and go to white.
Yeah, I wonder why
And
you did
so,
that, because I figured that with only having like the D in the vec tree, you still have black and white. So I really wonder why you mix it.
yeah. So what I end up, and like what I often do is I'll use the D, which is this 0 to 1
Mhm.
value, and then I will colorize everything and make the colors interpolate between the two things. So now we have the ability to change the background and change the foreground independently just by
Ah, okay, that's why you did
specifying
it.
these different
Okay, okay.
values.
Cool.
So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy some code that I have in,
Actually, it's interesting to learn your process of how you would color this grid, because I would have done it probably like similar, but not in this way. Like I would first put the D inside the vec tree and then after create like a color mix, which is basically what you did that, and then put the color on it. So you kind of like
yeah,
save a step for me in your process, actually. So
yeah, this is just the way I kind of do it, because the way I see it is like I'm mixing between A and B
yeah.
based on D. And the other thing actually that I want to switch here, so let's say right now instead of using green, which I think is this one here,
You want to
I'm
use
going
the
to use a
background.
background color.
Yeah.
And so the way I get these colors is like I'll find a nice hex code with like a Google color picker, and then I will go into the RGB and like find out the RGB values for that. So it's like 233, 227, 213, and then divide that by 255. And that's like a simple way of just turning hex codes into like a vec3 in GLSL. And so now I can specify this in my color mix here. And what we should see is this beige background.
Yeah.
And so
Cool.
I'm actually I'm gonna do one other thing where I'm gonna invert the D value, because what I would actually prefer is for the background to be the first argument, and then my ink color, let's call it ink color, and I'll make a thing up here. Const vec3 color, and let's just use like 0.25 for now. Or even lower, let's say like it's a dark ink. So this is kind of what I prefer to have, where the mix is always from background to foreground, and then the D here is like the parameter that mixes from background to foreground. And this is how I'm going to actually end up doing like color compositing of other stuff. So that's the first thing I want to do. The next thing I want to fix is that if you resize your browser or resize the surface, it gets a little bit squashed. One axis of the things looks different than the other.
I'm resizing
And so
right
the
now so
thing,
people can see this. So this is why we were using this different UV formula that we had in order to make it fix. But I wonder what you will use.
Yeah.
I always tend to do this. This is just what's worked well for me, is correct the, so at first I get the aspect ratio, which is the uniform resolution X divided by Y. And then what I'll do is I'll correct the X coordinate in the UVs so that I multiply the UV dot X by aspect ratio.
Right. Yeah.
And then another thing that I sometimes do, and this part's optional, but this is just something I do, and there's maybe a better way to do it than what I'm doing here, but what I do sometimes is I and I'll show the issue. So if you're here and try resizing the surface, like the shader part, and you'll see that like it always kind of stays fixed on like the bottom left in a way. I don't know if you notice that.
No. Yeah. Like in the right
Yeah.
side is like moving, and on the left is
Yeah, it's more when you resize the height, I think.
Okay.
And when you resize the width also, it's like the grid is kind of fixed the bottom left or the left of the image. So this is another weird little like detail that sometimes is useful, sometimes isn't, depending on what your tasks are and depending on the size of the canvas and stuff like that. But I'll do this code here, which looks like this. And this code here is basically saying go from 0 to 1 values into -1 to 1 values. So it's like whenever you see me writing something like this, which is just ×2 - 1, that's where I go from 0 to 1 to this sort of space.
Okay.
And then when you're doing modifications, it's almost like it's kind of centered in a way. And
That's
then
really cool.
I go the other way around. It's a weird thing that I do a lot in a lot of my code. And I
Not
don't know,
only
maybe it's
you,
just
I've
me.
seen it in other like developers doing shaders. I've seen this.
Mhm.
That I think when Yuri was here on the summer, he was doing this multiplication for 0.5 plus 0.5, and we were like, why don't you do per 1, for
Plus
example?
1.
Yeah, exactly. And then he was explaining why
Mhm.
you don't do 1, but you have to split it up, kind of, so to get this mathematically speaking. So you're not alone.
Yeah. So now when you resize the surface, like if you resize the height, it kind of scales down from the center.
Yeah.
And if you resize the width,
Yeah.
I see it.
it feels like it's no longer locked. So it's like a little detail. So that's
so
that.
nice. Yeah.
There's another thing you could also do, which sometimes is nice, but I don't know if you'll need to do it in this or not, but let's just try it, is sometimes when you resize really small, like I'm doing it here, but like let's say you switch from the one view to the other on CodePen, and all of a sudden you make the canvas really narrow, let's say. When the canvas is like super narrow, you just lose the grid and you end up with like a grid that has like 3 columns instead of like 100 columns. So one thing you could do is you could say if the aspect ratio is greater than 1, you do one thing, and if the aspect ratio is less than 1 or equal to 1, you do the other thing. And then what happens is that when you like, and this is just a slightly different take on this approach to scaling things, but now what happens is when you resize the surface, the canvas.
Oh, I see. Now it's getting
instead of
smaller and bigger,
it gets
like
really
horizontally.
Small.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of like the
So
effect
that's
that
just
you
when
had
it gets too
before
narrow.
vertically, but now horizontally.
Yeah.
So cool.
So that's something that might be worth doing. Sometimes you don't need it, whatever.
Yeah.
The next thing
It's cool to
I
learn,
want to
like
do,
you said, depending on what
Media
you want to
queries
do.
for shaders.
Yeah. So the next thing I want to do is actually unrelated to the shader, but if you go into the JavaScript, I want to start getting this set up for print.
Yeah.
And I've already set up some code here in the on-window
Which line?
vsize function.
Which line are you?
110. 110.
Right.
On the JavaScript.
Oh, here we are. Okay.
I'm there. Just to show it on
And
the
so,
stream.
yeah, right now we have like some code that says set the size to the window inner width and inner height, set the device pixel ratio. This is the kind of code you want when you're doing like a game or when you're doing a full screen web app. But let's say you're coding shaders for print, or let's say you're coding shaders for like a really high quality Instagram post where it's just going to be an image, or maybe it'll be like a series of frames that you'll stitch together into a GIF or something like that. But you want to have full control over the size. You can use some code like what I've got here. And what this will do is set it to a fixed size.
Which one can choose, as I saw, like the width and height that you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it scales the canvas style to the width of the page so that you can always see the full frame. And so now it'll just be kind of locked to the top left. And the next thing is now like you can actually just right click the canvas and save as, and you get a PNG. And this is pretty much my approach for printing.
I'm doing it.
I mean,
hold on.
Yeah, like that's the funny thing with this kind of system is that it's very easy to get really high quality images from web rendering, where you just, if you wanted a larger image, you can specify the exact dimensions, or you can increase the pixel ratio.
Oh my God, that's so cool. I open up on my screen. Oh, can I show?
Yeah.
Let me see if I can show this on
That is
OBS.
so, wow.
Can you
That's
see it as
awesome.
well, Eliza?
That's really cool.
How
Cool.
can I do this? I
So
don't know
that's
if I
kind
can
of
show
like
it,
how
but
you can actually get like good quality PNG from your code. And this is really good for like Instagram posts and stuff where you have like a specific
yeah.
resolution that you want to print at or that you want to share at and stuff like that.
I have a question now. The save image as, did you have to code something in here, or this is like browser's
No.
thing? Because the
Just
browsers
browser stuff.
always. Oh, it has never occurred to me to do this, like with the art that I do, like, oh, save as. Huh.
Yeah.
It's like
I
an
know it
aha
took me a
moment.
while as well. I was like, oh, I could just save it. And in
Yeah.
Canvas
Oh my
Sketch, I
God.
actually have it set up as a hotkey so that you can just hit
I
Command
remember
S.
that. Yeah.
Mm.
And it's really nice that way because then it's like as you're coding, you see something and you just hit a hotkey. Guys, I need to go to the toilet real quick. So
Yeah, no
No
let me
worries.
worries.
just pause.
Of course.
No, we will be here. So that just blew my mind.
Cool.
I can't believe I never clicked save image. Like,
I think I also usually take like,
because like when I take screens of my stuff, sometimes
yeah.
if I'm not using like, I don't know, some certain other tool with command, what I do is that I would do like, I'm on a Mac, so there's like this shortcut that you click and then you can take a screen, right? So of maybe you want a
Yeah,
screenshot
exactly.
of the thing. So that's how I do it. It
Me
never
too.
occurred to me to click, okay, right click, save image as. So this is just like, this is very helpful to know when I don't need like the screenshot of like the UI, but just the thing.
I'm trying to think actually, because so many of the things that I share are animated, but back when I was doing more like still stuff, I was always taking just like screen captures and like tracing it
Me too.
like
That's
a
what I was
fool.
like, is
It's like
wasting time.
never thought about that.
Wasting
Yeah,
time.
so funny. But I love when that kind of like obvious thing just appears that suddenly like you would have never thought of it, but it was always there.
Yeah. I wonder if like we blew the minds, or Matt blew the minds of more people as well in the chat, or that is watching, that they were like,
Everyone else is like, we've always done that.
yeah, maybe only you and I.
It's just you guys. It's just you who never thought about it.
But I'm excited. It's cool. I'm
funny.
really happy
It would-
about Matt's concentration on the design part, I must say.
Yeah.
Like these little details. Because it was
I
funny when
feel
he
like,
showed his like mood where I'm like, oh, that's my process when I do stuff.
but yeah, see, now I'm gonna maybe just try. Maybe I'll go back to mood boarding sometimes, but just like he said, like limit,
Yeah.
like tell myself like maximum 20 pins or whatever, like hard stop after that, because or else, like he said, you get too fixated on it being specific. Because I like what you're saying, like you get an inspiration, you tap into a vibe, and then see how it influences what you're making, but not like, yeah, so clear a specific image in your mind that you're trying to reproduce, because that's like it's too hard.
Yeah, but I will say, like in a lot of different creative processes, I would say not only in design, it's quite like known. I was doing a lot of copywriting before I became a designer, and copywriting means that you have to come up like with the print, like the words, no, for things on advertising. And when we were like brainstorming, we would basically, if we were doing like a copy for an ad on a magazine, we would just go and grab some magazines that we liked and like read the
Totally.
ads, just because you need some inspiration. I was gonna say that you cannot start as a creator from zero, like musicians, like painters, like it's maybe sometimes, but quite often you need inspiration, and it doesn't necessarily has to be like from the thing that you're doing, but sometimes like even like from outdoors, like when you're taking a walk and it's something completely unrelated, and then you see something and you're like, oh, maybe I could apply this on my
nature.
Yeah, exactly. So inspiration comes from like everywhere, but I think we need it as creators, like a pinch of something from somewhere. So
yeah, lately I've been going to like more museums and exhibitions and things, and it's always like really amazing to come out of them, because every time you go to like a nice gallery or like a museum, you come out of it being like, wow. Like even like the British Museum in London here. I went in not expecting to see anything that would inspire me. I went more for like historical reasons, but there was a whole exhibition on the illustrator that made the wave, that like Hosukai
Oh, yeah,
illustrator.
this
His
blue
name's
wave.
Hosukai, I think.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of printmaking and a lot of this like fine detail and etching in wood and stuff like that. And I came out of it being like thinking more about like how it would be kind of nice to like apply that kind of style in code, and it would just give like the programmatic stuff a little bit more of a tactile feeling. And like after seeing that, I wanted to like come home and like write code that was like doing little pointillism stuff. So yeah.
Cool. I love that.
Cool. Okay, so we just saved the image. But the next thing, what else was I wanting to do? Oh yeah. So the next thing I wanted to do is start to get into circles. And like anti-aliasing and some of those like nitty-gritty things. So I'll start doing the same thing we were doing with this grid, where we just start with like a circle that's like a repeating line kind of thing. And then we'll actually draw some like filled in circles and things like that. So let's go back to the shader. I'm there in the shader.
Yeah.
And let's start with a new variable called radial. And this is kind of it's part of the polar coordinates sort of system. So usually we're just dealing with like what's called Cartesian coordinates, which is like x, y, like what we have with the UV coordinates. But there's also this other type of coordinate system called polar coordinates, and it's composed of these two parts. One of the parts is the radius from the sort of center of the coordinate system, I guess you could say. And then the other part of the coordinate system is the angular sort of angle. And we'll get into the angle later. But anyways, what we just want to start with is just like getting a radius. And we're actually going to have to modify this in a second. But what we can do, just to sort of visualize it, either debug it by just setting the d value to whatever the float is and just see how that looks. And it's going to mix between, still going to mix between our two colors here. The other way you can debug things is just at the very bottom of the shader, just to like go back to black and white rendering so that we don't get confused by anything. Oops, sorry. Color is equal to D. There. Just to debug sort of, it's like a nice way to debug. Because once, oh, not D, it's radial.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this makes more sense.
But basically black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, because I just like to work with black and white until I'm ready to actually apply the color. And so the other thing I just did there is I just did minus 0.5 to sort of center this in the screen. And one thing actually that I might just do for a second is just to go back to the JavaScript and just like toggle back the full screen stuff just for a little bit, just to make sure that, because when we resize the canvas right now, we don't really have a sense of whether the shader is resizing correctly. So just to make sure that we're sort of, in a space where the shader is going to always resize correctly, I'm just going to set it back to this. And when it comes time to do printing and things like that, we can go back. So we have this radius, which starts at 0 in the center of the screen and goes to some value that's higher than that as it goes further away from the center. And now what we're going to do is just, we'll start by just setting this into a single circle, I guess we could say. So for this debug, where should I put this? I'll do another thing here called circle. So this is after I define the radial component. I'm going to just call this like circle. And I'm just going to do something simple for now. Just a step function. And then I'm going to just debug that in the shader.
All good.
Yeah. So what we have is a circle, and that's cool. And so one of the things, so there's a couple things here. One is that now we've drawn a circle, which is nice and easy. But if you zoom in on this image, or if you save it really big and you look at it zoomed up, you'll see this kind of jagged edge.
Yeah, like pixelated.
It's a really small detail, but this is like the kind of details that really get to me. So we're
Mm.
going to spend a little bit of time fixing that. And I'll show one way of fixing that. This is kind of how I consider to be the correct way to fix anti-aliasing in a shader when it comes to these kind of issues. And basically the reason it's happening is because our UV coordinates are the radial component here, which comes from our UV coordinates. They're changing in this like slow gradual way from like 0 to 1 or something like that. But then all of a sudden we're using this step function, and the step function is kind of like an if-else statement. So it's almost like it's saying like if X, then do something else, you know, whatever. And because of that, what we end up with is exactly two colors. We end up with exact white, so 1, and exact black, which is 0. And there's no blur or like gradation or sort of smoothness in between that. And so the circle ends up looking really jagged because the edges are always just going to be black or white and nothing in between. And so what we want to do is we actually want to do some kind of a smooth step function. And so what I'm
I
going to
was
do
hoping
here is
maybe you were gonna say that.
have you guys been done lots of smooth step stuff?
Yeah, Eliza
Yeah.
likes it a lot, I would say.
I do enjoy smooth stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you guys have probably explored it in so much
It's
detail
fun
now.
because
But
every function you're using today is like our base favorite functions that we always when we code just us two together. It's usually we reach for fract, step, smooth step, mix. What else?
But I love to listen to your explanation, you know, because
Exactly. It's interesting to
sometimes
see how you
we
choose to use
do
them.
it, but we don't explain it. I wouldn't say we explain it
I mean,
like
I don't
you,
know that
but
our implementation is so intentional. It's
yeah,
more like
yeah,
exploratory.
exactly. Yeah.
So it's cool to hear you
Mm-hmm.
talk about it this way.
Mm-hmm.
Yay.
so now we
Cool.
have a blurry circle.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is, using smooth step. And the way that smooth step kind of works is you put in two variables, well, three actually. There's the low end and the high end, and then there's the actual value that you're putting into this smooth step function. And anything that's below, how does it work? It's something like anything that's below the low end is one color, anything that's above the high end is another color, anything in between is interpolated. I don't know if that's correct or not, but it's something like that. But basically what we have now, if you set it up in such a way that you have a radius variable and then you do minus, let's say a glow, which I just call it glow because it kind of feels like a faded edge, and then the same radius plus glow. Now you have this kind of nice control where you can say what's the radius of the circle. It's going to be 0.5, which is exactly to the edge of the surface. And then what's the glow? So this glow, we can make it really small.
And then it's
And the
more
smaller we make it, the
finer.
more it'll be nice, like
That's what I
smooth
thought.
edge. And what's
There we
happening here
go.
now is that we have this circle that's kind of nice and smooth. So
Mhm.
this is kind of the simple, basic way to do anti-aliasing.
Yeah.
But it's kind of going to break down depending on the, different parameters of your shader, maybe how close you're looking at like the function. So if you're zooming in a lot on this stuff, you might start to see that it sort of breaks down. Like the glow is maybe too glowy. It's too soft, and it should be a bit harder. Or maybe it's the other way around, where it's like too hard and it should be softer, depending on like the scale you're using and stuff like that. And so we're actually going to explore a little bit more of a complicated way of doing it, but it's a little bit more accurate. And I'm going to copy in some code from a note that I have here, and I'm going to just scroll up to above the main function. And I'm going to copy in this code, and it's probably going to crash once I start to try and use it, or it might not crash. Let's see.
A step.
I'll be
What
right
is this
back in a
function
second.
doing?
Yep.
Yeah. What is
So
this function doing?
this is what I call anti-alias step.
Oh, that's what you call it. Step. All right. Yeah.
And so instead of it being just a simple smooth step, what it does is it first figures out the exact amount of glow that you need. So the amount of width kind of that should exist on the edge of this function. Like instead of it being like a really, like thick glow or like a really thin glow, it figures out exactly the sort of distance between, neighboring pixels or something like that in like a very exact way using this thing called fwidth. This is like a built-in function. And when you start to use it, let's just see if it'll work or not.
Is this from
I
Book
can
of
I can
Shaders?
comment
That's
out.
what you mean? Book of
Oh, it
Shaders.
might
I mean,
be
sorry, from GLSL. Is this from
the actual function or the
no
AA step.
the wait a second, because now I'm confused. The fwidth on
Mhm.
line
Fwidth is
17
a built-in function in
in
GLSL and
GLSL.
in like and it's a built-in function that's only available with an extension, which actually seems
Oh,
to work on my
okay.
computer right now, but it might
That's
not work on
why.
everyone's computer.
No, that's why I was asking you, because this is the first
So,
time that I see this, so I wanted to Google it
mhm,
actually and look into
yeah.
Chronos. I found it.
So
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
just gonna
okay.
jump down to because I don't know, do you see the circle, right? Or
I
no?
see the circle, but I don't know what
Mhm.
I'm supposed to see. I do see a black circle
Right.
over a white background.
Yeah. So that's good because sometimes when you use this function,
Mm.
it will cause an error. So especially if
Oh,
you're
okay.
using like Regal or like another WebGL framework,
Yeah.
and you start to use this function, it's going to maybe error out, and it's because you might need to enable an extension on the shader material. So I'm just going to jump down to the JavaScript for a second,
Mm.
and if you go to shader material,
Sure, the
let me just open
material.
up the actual.
Which line?
Um,
Oh,
what
I
line is
saw you.
this?
I found you. I think
93.
93. Mm.
Yeah. So there's a little thing that you should put in here. Another reason that we might be seeing it is
Mm.
maybe because you might be on WebGL 2 actually. So I
Yeah,
think
maybe because I
nowadays by
just
default,
pull the console and I don't see any error. Like there's no
yeah.
error.
So I think by default nowadays, a lot of like Chrome is using
Mm.
WebGL 2 and 3JS has WebGL 2. Don't quote me on
Okay.
that, but I think a lot of it is starting to move over to WebGL 2.
Mm.
And in WebGL 2, you don't need to enable this extension. It's just
Mm.
built into OpenGL. But if you're using WebGL 1 or if you're on like an older phone or something, you need to add this little bit to your shader material, and it's called derivatives.
Oh, okay.
So this is what's called standard derivatives. Standard derivatives are a feature in shaders that let you use this function called fwidth, and there's another function called dfdx, dfdy. Those are the x and y axis. And it lets you, I don't really fully grasp all the math behind it,
Mm.
but basically
Mm.
what I understand is that it's like it's like some sort of, I don't know, differential function or something like that. But basically it's
Mm.
like allows you to get a measurement um, of like an accurate distance between two texels or something, two pixels in the shader. I'm not a very
Oh,
good
okay.
person to ask about how this
Okay.
actually works.
Yeah, yeah.
But in the context of this anti-aliasing thing,
Mm.
what we're using it for is just to get the exact width required to always be a sort of 1 pixel or so edge. And no matter what, no matter what the scaling is we're using of the canvas, and no matter what
Mm-hmm.
the sort of scaling is that we're using of the variables that are going into these kind of distance functions and things like that, it's always going to give us back 1 pixel. Because usually when we're dealing with shaders, we don't have like the ability to say like draw a 1 pixel line. We
Mm.
just have to say like draw a line that's like 0.1, or something like that. And 0.1 might mean different things depending on all the other parameters of your shader and things like that. Whereas with standard derivatives, it actually gives us a way to say we want something that is kind of like 1 pixel or something like that. That's kind of how I like to think of it, at least. I don't know if that's 100% correct, but
Yeah.
this AA step function gives us the ability to draw these kind of shapes with
I'm
like
gonna,
perfect crisp edges.
for a second, I'm gonna put on the screen for people to see. Like, I found the Chronos page with like this fwidth
Mm-hmm.
native function, just because for people, I'm gonna put it on the chat. Like me, I was like, I've never seen it on a shader, never heard. So, um, I love that you brought this today, because this is like really the first time that I saw this, and I was trying to understand. So, from what I got, is it's just a more precise way to get that value of the pixels within shader per se, right? So
Yeah, I mean, because if you look at the two methods of anti-aliasing that we have for the circle,
Mm,
we have one method where the glow is just this arbitrary 0.001,
mm-hmm.
which might work okay for our image, but depending on the radius that we're using, so that depending on how big our
True. If we
circle
make it
is,
bigger or smaller, it's gonna change.
mhm. Like I think it's things
Right.
like that where depending on the parameters we're using, it's maybe not going to be a perfect edge, and
Yeah.
depending on also maybe like how the UV coordinates are set up, like if the UV coordinates are scaled and things like that, that's where we want it to always be a very perfect edge, regardless of all the other parameters.
I
We want it
wonder,
to always be this like 1 pixel edge kind of.
could you also say that this f width, what it's doing is that it's helping us kind of normalize the value, so that the value will, um, like you were saying, will always it will always work, no matter what, or would not the word
Yeah,
normalization would not apply in this sense of the use of the f width
yeah. I mean,
function.
usually when I think of normalization, I think of like taking like a vector and normalizing it to a -1 to 1 range, kind of, in like a unit vector where it's just like everything's between 0 and 1 sort of thing, or between -1 to 1. So that's when I think of normalizing. So I don't know if I'd call it normalizing, but it
Okay.
kind of does something like that, where it like gives us this consistent value that is consistent regardless of a
Range.
lot of all the other parameters going on.
Okay.
So like another example where this is really useful is, let's say you have a shader that's like a wireframe shader.
Mm-hmm.
So like I actually have this like let's see.
Where are you now?
I'm just gonna paste a link. Where should I paste a link? It's a good
You
place
can
to
put it
paste a link.
here on the HTML,
Okay.
and then I can open it up. Cool. Wireframes. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a project of
So this is like a thing
yours.
I did a
Yeah.
while back. And it's like I think it was,
Cool.
yeah, it was part of like um, part of a magazine
Mm-hmm.
or something. I can't remember even the magazine right now, but it was like an article that I wrote.
Mm-hmm.
I can't find the article. It's probably somewhere in one of these sites or something. But basically, it's this approach to using wireframes on these meshes. So these are actual
Mm-hmm.
3D meshes, not just like a full screen shader. And then you're using these wireframe shaders, kind of like what we're doing today, just doing a little bit of extra stuff to make it like dotted or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm using this AA step, and there's actually even a way that you can use the AA step so that if you're zooming in and out of and I don't know if I'm doing it in this demo or not, but there are ways to make it so that if you're zooming in and out of the mesh, the wireframe will always be a consistent pixel width, which is kind of nice. Like you can consider there's like two approaches. One is that if you zoom out of the mesh and you're really far away from it, the wireframe will get really thin and eventually it'll be hard to see the wireframe. But another approach is that the wireframe is like a consistent thickness. It always takes up 1 pixel width on your screen, no matter how far in or out you zoom of the mesh. And that's maybe useful for other things like
I was trying to zoom in, but I can't. I click
Yeah,
on
me
your
too.
yeah,
demo.
I don't know if it's going to work on this demo. It's more of a
Okay.
concept.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
so
what
I
you
don't
meant.
think it works in
Okay.
this demo. It's
Okay. Okay.
No, it's more of a, I'm just talking about it more generally.
Okay.
Like it's
Okay.
a concept that I could have set it up in this code so that if
Mm-hmm.
you're zooming in and
Mm-hmm.
out, the width of that thickness is always the same. And that's where you'd also use f width, is to sort of, I guess you could say, kind of like you're saying, normalize it or just make it like more consistent.
More
Anyways,
consistent. Okay.
I'll leave that here like for reference.
Yeah. 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 Thank you so much. Oh, this is so
Cool.
useful. Look forward to
Yeah.
try it out, like the F with
Mhm.
something.
It's more accurate, right?
Yeah.
Than like a smooth step.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
awesome.
So this AA step function, we'll use it a bunch, but we don't need to use it for the grid because the grid it doesn't need to be anti-aliased because it's just like a perfectly axis aligned image. Like the line is just completely vertical or completely horizontal. But anytime we have a curve or anytime we have a diagonal line or any sort of diagonal joins,
Mm-hmm.
that's where you kind of want to use this kind of an AA step function. So I'm
Mm.
just going to turn off the debug.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just gonna go back to just drawing this grid, and I'll just like set this up. in such a way.
And you want your
So
circle
let's
there.
say, yeah, we want our circle. And instead of just putting the circle in right away, what I actually want to do is basically do what we were doing already with the grid. But I'm going to do this. Let's see. Okay, this isn't going to work yet, but let's just try here. So instead of it being a full, that works kind of. It's not anti-aliased.
No, it
That's
looks
interesting.
yacked again somehow.
But it's,
I don't know if it's
Yeah.
because of the eyes, the way that, you know, sometimes the perception is not exactly what, but it's the way that the eye, or is it really pixelated?
No, it is pixelated.
definitely pixelated.
Oh, that's because I'm double stepping it. So I should just be using circle.
Ah, true. Yeah,
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
more.
such a big
Ooh.
difference.
Ooh, it's so cool.
And so instead of it being just, I want it to be more like a graph paper, like I was saying. I know I'm still on this graph paper, which is, I haven't even started drawing the circle.
I love
But
it.
let's just do the graph paper just real quick. So let's, instead of doing it like this, I'm gonna just do this. So I'm gonna do another one of these fract sort of things, just like we had up here. And I'm gonna do radial times repeats. Oops.
By the way, you kept saying like,
Something
"Oh,
like
I'm
that.
just doing something simple," but you have already taught us so much. I mean,
So much,
come on,
like
Matt.
mind blown.
Yeah,
I'm trying to like
exactly.
absorb it
So-
all. That's why I'm not saying so much.
So it's the little
So-
things, you know. So
So thanks. I mean, it's a lot of like, it's a lot of little details to come up with just some circles on the screen. And this is why I like to say just use Canvas 2D if you want to do this kind of stuff. But it's nice to learn these kind of things for sure.
no, it's
So-
cool. It's interesting to see your process and the way, as we were saying, the way that you think when you craft your things, like those details that you pay attention. That, like you were saying, maybe the person that sees the art like don't even realize that you were like even calculating the edges of, you know, those fine moments that maybe.
Yeah.
All of the details you have to take into account.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so from
So here, what I want to do is I want it to be like a graph paper where it's not just a grid, but it's also like this kind of circle that's going out. But I want these circles to just be lines that look exactly like the grid that we've got. And so we can start with this fract thing. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can make it so that it's just a line. Instead of it being this gradient from each circle to each next circle, I want it just to be a line where those circle
Flat
lines
line.
should be.
So you're gonna step it or use your AA.
I'm going to use a step, yeah, something like it. But first, before I do that, well, I could just try using a step to visualize it, just a simple step.
And then you want
Yeah, so now we start to have what we kind of want, right? So that's kind of close. And I could use an AA step.
That's what I thought.
And now that's pretty close, but this is really, really getting into detail. But if you zoom in, you'll see one edge of the line that makes these circles is nice and smooth, and the other edge is jagged.
I see it.
So
yeah,
yeah,
I was wondering
that's the
about
kind
that.
of thing that we're gonna have to fix. And so to fix that, I'll just explain again how it looks if I were to just take that off. So to fix that, instead of it being that it goes from 0, so black, to like white, or 0 to 1, I want it to go from 0 to 1 back to 0. And so it's going to be a bit weird, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to do circle times, no, sorry. What am I doing here? Abs. And then I think this might do it. Let's see if this does it or not. Sort of something like this, yeah. So what I'm starting to do now is make it so that instead of it going from 0 to 1, it's going from 0 to 1 back to 0. And then what I can do is I can then do an AA step.
And now
And
it's complete.
So clean.
Now both
Full
sides,
circle.
yeah.
Clean.
Now the next thing though, that's the problem, is that it's no longer aligned perfectly as I want it to be. I kind of want it to be like this perfect alignment. So I'm just going to do a little shift here where I'm going to add a fract. and I'm going to just shift the circle by 0.5.
Mm.
And I'm using fract so that it stays within a 0 to 1 range,
Mm.
and it just sort of shifts the value. And what this should now do is it should lead to lines that are a little bit more connected, I guess you could say. So that like each circle kind of lines up on the horizontal and vertical middle line with the grid. Okay, that's our graph paper. Oh, there's one other thing that I wanted to look at. Yeah, one other thing here we could do, I think, if I just find it here. Just a second, I have it written down. Yeah, I mean, we could, yeah, let me just test this again. Change that. They're both kind of cool, actually. You can, this little value I'm changing just changes the
I don't see the difference.
So it's like a small detail, but right now, if you look at
it,
it, what you'll see, oh, the one that I've got here, it's like this little value here. I'll call it.
You don't see the difference, Eliza?
Between 0, 0 and 0.5? No, I didn't.
So the circle in the center is in the middle of a box, and then it's in the middle of two lines.
Oh,
or sorry, it's
now I
smaller.
see
What am I
it.
saying?
Now I see it.
No,
now I
no,
see it. Yeah, it grows.
It's
It kind of grows.
smaller.
Let me change it again, just to see it
And
again.
it just makes that circle line up very close to the.
Yeah,
Like it lines up the circle perfectly, or almost perfectly.
I was looking at the other
box.
circles, so I wasn't looking in the middle. So then I was like, where is it? I see. Yeah,
so that's one thing. And then let's say now what we're gonna do is make it so that, like, imagine this is actual graph paper. Like it wouldn't be like this pure, very black color. It would be maybe a little softer. So I'm going to go down to the mix function, and I'm just going to lower the opacity of the ink that we're using here. So what I'm describing in this function here, and I'm just going to pull this into a constant. 1 second. So I'm putting this up at the top near the ink color. I've added an ink opacity constant. And if you look at that mix function again, I've kind of got a setup here where whenever we want to mix stuff, we mix the background with the foreground, and then we multiply the distance, sort of this distance field, you can call it, with an opacity. And that allows us to control things kind of like as if they're layers in Photoshop. That's kind of how we're going to start to imagine this.
Yeah, that's what we like, how we like to explain to people how to layer up things on GLSL. Like basically that's, or what is it called in English when you make a...
Our analogy?
Yeah, that. An analogy, like with Photoshop layers. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of, and then we'll even do some like multiply blending instead of just a regular, like, I don't know, normal blending. So I'll start to finally get into this circle. So let's call this filled circle or something like that. I don't know. And we'll do a step function for now. Step is just nice and easy to play with. And let's give it a radius.
By the way, somebody on the chat said that what you were saying or teaching is very 𝗏, like the
fluid, 𝗏.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think you like his work, right? So it's an inspiration.
I love 𝗏's work, and this is actually like this image that we have now is almost identical to one of 𝗏's wall drawings, where I think the instructions are something like lines horizontal and vertical and circular or something like that, and it ends up looking very similar to this.
Yeah, I imagine.
So actually, let's call it shape. Okay, let's see if this works or not.
Hold on, let's help you. Oops. It's because shape is a float, and you have like color is a vector. So the first two values have to be the same. The third value can be a floating number. Yeah, cool.
So I'm just gonna invert the distance so that it's 1 minus the step function. And so I'm going to use a smaller radius, like 0.35, maybe 0.25. And so the next sort of thing to do is to actually finally get inspired by that mood board that I have and try and maybe do a bit of a color wheel or something like that with HSV or with OKLAB color space and just dive into that a little bit. So what
What's
we'll
OKLAB?
do, OKLAB is another color space. It's a more recent color space and it's meant to be perceptually uniform so that if you change the hue and you leave the sort of the saturation, it's called chroma. You leave the chroma and you leave the lightness at the same value, but then you change the hue, it should give you these colors that are perceptually close together in a way, so that people would be like, oh, those two colors have the same lightness, and those two colors
Cool.
have the same chromaticity.
That's
Whereas
interesting.
color space like HSV is not perceptually uniform in that when you change those variables, sometimes you end up with colors that you'd expect to have similar properties, but they look drastically different when if you were actually to give them to people and people were to look at them, they'd be like, those two have different saturations or chromaticities, or they have different lightnesses and things like that.
Okay.
It's a little weird. It's like a unnecessary. I think it's easier to start with HSV and Q
Is there a
saturation
website,
value.
by the way? I was trying to Google this OKLAB thing. Can
Hmm.
you share a link because I couldn't find it?
Yeah,
Just
let me find. Yeah, here it is.
I don't know why I couldn't find it.
If I put it in maybe the Hangouts.
Yeah,
Or...
yeah, that's fine.
It's been so someone in the comments, Andy, oh hi Andy, says it's been invented by Bjorn Ottesen, OKLAB. And then he wrote a nice article about it apparently. Someone just linked
Okay.
it. Someone linked it in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, Bjorn Ottensson. Is he German or Swedish?
Bjorn?
Or
Swedish, I think.
Swedish.
Ottesen?
Because there are Bjorns here in Germany too. But Ottensson sounds
wonder.
Scandinavian, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe he's like Danish or Finnish or something.
Here it is. Comparing OKLAB to HSV, which was what you were saying, right, Matt? So it's here.
Cool.
And do you have the link I gave you in Hangouts as well?
Yeah,
Here,
that's the one that I.
chat.
Or did you send a new one?
Oh, is that the same one? Oh yeah, I'm seeing it now.
Yeah, that's the one.
Swedish.
That's the same one. Yeah.
It takes
Apparently
some
he's
seconds
Swedish.
on Twitch. Oh, he's Swedish?
Yeah. So
yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, he wrote this article all about it, and it's just kind of fun to try a new color space.
And how did you bump into this thing, Matt, again?
Well, this is when I went through my like color research phase. I went deep into the rabbit hole of colorimetry and things like that. Because it's really fascinating when it's fascinating, but it's also maybe not like that applicable to everything. But it's kind of like there's like it started with, I think, where was it? I'm gonna just send a link.
Yeah.
Just a sec. So I don't know exactly where it started, but I started doing like some demos and tests where I was trying to create color palette generators with generative code and things like that. And a lot of it came down to like, let's say you wanted to like interpolate between, red and blue with a gradient. Sometimes you'd end up with like these weird colors in between. And the solution would be to interpolate inside of a different color space instead of interpolating in RGB. So this is like the kind of thing where I started to explore these different color spaces. And I also started to just learn a little bit about how we sort of perceive color and things like that. And it's just like an interesting thing to sort of dabble in. I don't know if it's really made me like, that much more attuned to using color in my work or anything like that, but it's been kind of a fun research topic, and especially during lockdown when like we're just stuck inside, like it's nice to just be able to like read lots of stuff about it.
Speaking about
but I'll
colors,
just paste another thing.
Yeah. Speaking about color, I wanted to ask you, since you were saying that you like did your research and pay attention, I wonder like when you do your work, do you care like as well about, or do you think about people with color blindness when you make, for example, you choose a certain palette? it's in your mind sometimes that maybe the people that is going to see your work won't be able to see like those true colors, you know, but maybe they, because either they have some color blinded, they would see a different one. So do you think of that, and do you consider it, or?
Not enough. No, I don't really, unfortunately. So I'd say, yeah, I don't consider it enough. It's something I should be considering more. And I think part of it is that the tools that I'm using, like, you know, Canvas Sketch and things like that, there's no, at least I haven't seen like a really easy way to visualize the image across multiple different color deficiencies or like color vision deficiencies or whatever. If that was the case, it would be amazing, because then you could just, as you're developing the artwork, you know, you could see maybe like several different thumbnails, and some of the thumbnails you might notice don't look as you'd like them to for
Mm-hmm.
somebody that has like, you know, some sort of color blindness. That would be
Mm-hmm.
really cool. I don't have anything like that, and so as a result, I'm just focusing on what I can see.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
yeah. One of the things I am doing though quite a lot is in this is maybe in some ways helped by uniform color spaces,
Mm-hmm.
is like you could say something like, oh, this is, you know, has a constant lightness. And another thing
Mm-hmm.
that I do really often in most of my generative work is I'll actually use these contrast ratio algorithms. So like a
Mm-hmm.
common one is like, I think the WCAG color contrast ratio, which gives you the color contrast between two colors.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll use that in a lot of my work to when I'm like choosing random colors and things like that. I'll only choose a random color if it meets a certain contrast ratio criteria. And it's the reason I do that is not so much for color blindness, but I think it does help for colorblind people as well, because
Mm-hmm.
it means that there's a higher contrast ratio between the different colors in my work quite often. But primarily the reason I do that is because, and this is one of the things I sort of did discover actually during a lot of the color research phase,
Mm-hmm.
is that there's these different properties that make color palettes sort of pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, some theorists will say that like color palettes can be pleasing if they are very contrasting in the chroma value, or if they're very contrasting in like the hues, and so the colors are not too close together in hue, or they're not too close together in chromaticity, which is like
Yeah.
kind of like another way of saying saturation. A
Mm-hmm.
really simple way to make a color palette pleasing is to give it contrasting colors. And it's not always the case, it's not always true, but like if a color palette has low contrast, and
Mm-hmm.
then you compare it to a color palette that has high contrast, more often people will find that the high contrast color palette will be like rather pleasing. And it's not, you know, it's a generalization, it's not always true, and there's a lot of like really nice art that's like low contrast
Of
art, but
course, of course. Yeah.
yeah, but
But it's
it's just an
true
interesting
because it's
thing.
just
So
harder to see, right? When you have less contrast on it, it's just harder. Like, yeah, in general, I think for everybody, it's just, it doesn't mean that you don't have to do it that way, but it's just like, for some people, it might be just tougher to see it
Mm.
at glance, I suppose, when you have contrast.
mhm. Cool. So should we, I guess what we can do is we'll fill in the circle and we'll add it
Yeah.
to the shader. And what I'm going to try and do here, I'll just make it use AA step real quick. So what I'm going to try and make it do is give it like a color wheel sort of thing, where it goes from like red all the way over to like different colors like blue and all the different hues. And so I'm going to paste in a function. I'm going to start with HSV because it's really nice and simple, and then we
Mm,
might paste in the OKLAB function as well. And we'll
okay.
just paste this function in above the main.
Mm.
It's just a simple function. I don't
Yeah.
have a credit for it, sadly. I think I
I
just
think
took it
Char
off of
was
some random
using
gist.
this one the last time, or one of the streams when she
Oh,
HSV to
nice.
came.
RGB?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. So she
I've
likes
seen
to.
it in everyone's code. I think
Yeah, I
even
think a
in
lot
the
of
book of
people likes
shaders,
to
I've
use
seen
this
it.
one. So
Yeah. I
I don't
wonder
know
who
how to
wrote it.
create it. Sometimes I
Phantom,
want to think about
phantom
Inigo.
function.
Maybe Inigo did it.
Probably. I mean,
Hmm.
it's a good guess.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
So maybe it was
The
Inigo.
safest bet, I would say.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like that color. Love turquoise.
Yeah. So now what we can do is we have this hue saturation value, so we can set this anywhere between 0 and 1, and this is the saturation, which makes it more saturated,
Right.
obviously, and then the value, which is kind of like lightness. Or I don't really even understand the difference between value and lightness. It's something I should know, but I don't. Anyways, what we'll do is we're going to change this hue value based on the sort of angular component of the polar coordinate space. So I'm just going to call this angular. I'm going to do A10, and I'm going to do uv.y, uv.x. And this is in radians, and so we're going to have to normalize this into a 0 to 1 space. And so first we need to make sure that pi is defined in our shader. So I'm just going to zoom or scroll up and just drop in pi as a definition. Yeah, maybe I always use pi just because I don't know, the way I do it is just pi, and I basically I convert this value, because if you look at the docs for this overload of this function, it gives us back a value between negative pi and pi, and we want to go to 0 to 1. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do A10 plus pi divided by pi times 2. And then I'm going to use this angular value in the hue.
So then it's going to be...
And it's not right yet, because actually we're using the UV coordinates, which is somewhere at the bottom left or the bottom right or something like that. So we have to use uv.xy minus 0.5. Let's see if this works.
So that is in 0, like center. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I thought
Perfect.
I saw a little gradient peeking out, and I was like, is it just me? Is it my screen? This is awesome.
It was. Oh, wow. And
So now we have this kind of cool color wheel.
Oh my God, so fast. I thought it was going to take you longer to create this wheel. But actually, now when I think about it, I think there's a page in the book of shaders where
Definitely.
Patricio creates...
One of the first things I animated was the
forgot
color wheel ever.
Yeah.
One of my first shaders was like, oh, I understand.
Yeah, it's so nice.
Mm.
So
Cool.
the other thing that we can do that's kind of fun is we can step this value. So like a simple way to step stuff that I sometimes do. So in a color wheel in like these books in the mood board, it's not just like a smooth gradient. It's often like 6 different colors that are discrete.
Color stop, kind of.
Yeah, so we can call it stops or steps. And so I'm going to say like 6. I'm going to do angular is equal to 4 angular times steps divided by steps. And what this is going to do is it's going to multiply the value by the amount of steps, and then floor it, and then divide it. So we end up with like this discrete change. And it's kind of like if you were to graph this, it would be like a staircase kind of function.
I love it.
Now, something I was struggling with the other day, and this is where it gets a bit complicated. If we zoom in, we run into the same stuff that we've been dealing with all day.
I see the anti-aliasing now.
Jagged,
I mean, it's not
jagged
anti-alias,
edges.
but yeah, I see it. Like the more infinite you go, right? The smaller the pieces.
I see, interestingly, on my computer, there's like gradient and the lines are trembling.
What?
The lines are trembling?
Yeah. So some of the graph to the one line to the right of the light blue on the circle is like flickering, and the line through like the orange and the 2 like mid blue tones is also like trembly.
Oh, for me it's not trembling, but it's just like jacked.
Well, we could just turn off if we turn off the animation frame, is it still trembling?
No, now everything's like not trembling.
Yeah, but now it probably won't resize correctly unless we re-render.
Interesting. I wonder...
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're right. Then it doesn't resize properly. But I wonder if it's my screen, because I bought a new screen and I don't think I set it up
I was
properly.
gonna ask you what kind of screen is it? Was it the 4K screen or?
No, it's not a 4K screen. But it's like a G-Sync something.
Okay.
Video game screen.
Well, what about now? Is it still flickering?
No. Is it still resized?
So what I'm doing now is just setting the canvas size to a fixed value.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that tends to happen, oops, I just lost the page. Yeah, here we go. One of the things that tends to happen sometimes is when you're dealing with these kind of thin lines, if you scale them sometimes, like, I actually don't know exactly why, but like sometimes they don't come up as exactly 1 pixel. I guess it's because it's like a sub-pixel value, and it doesn't know what to do sometimes depending on the hardware and things like that. When you say render something that's 0.1 in width, how do they represent that on the screen if everything on the screen is in pixels? So I guess that's what happens.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Whereas now what's happening with our canvas is that we have a fixed size, and we're scaling the canvas to the size of the screen using CSS scaling. And what that might do in the browser, I don't know how they implement that, but they might do that with some kind of linear scaling so that everything gets a bit smooth when you scale it down. And so that might solve that problem. I don't know. But anyways, as long as you're using fixed size like we're doing now, when it actually comes time to print, if you right-click save, or if it's just sharing on the web, then it should be crisp. And that's also kind of the workflow I do with Canvas Sketch, where even my animations, I just ensure that they're fixed size, and I record each frame through Canvas Sketch so that you never get that kind of a flickering, because it's always capturing the exact pixels at that size kind of thing. So anyways, so yeah, but there is still an issue with this color wheel, because we're using a floor function, and anytime we use a step or a floor function on something that's curved or diagonal, that's not an axis aligned edge, that's where we want anti-aliasing. That's where we want it to be a slow gradation from one value to the other. And right now it's just going from pure red to pure orange, and then from pure yellow to orange, and yellow to green, and things like that. So there's no in-between colors. And so we kind of have to do some weird thing, which I was struggling a lot with today, and I've come up with a somewhat of a solution. It's not an ideal solution, but this will be an interesting thing if anyone wants to find the right way to do this. But what we kind of need to do is a smooth staircase function, and I'm going to send you a
link. Or where are you?
Well,
maybe I'll share my browser tab.
Okay, yeah, if you want to.
Yeah, because I just want to show.
I have this vague memory of Shar doing a soft floor a long time ago with us, but now I wouldn't be able to find it, but I'll try and dig it up and send it to you.
Yeah, that would be interesting, because I was trying to figure this out today, and it's actually surprisingly challenging.
Wait, isn't it in our Curiously Minded website, Eliza? What do you mean?
You're right. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
I'm resizing still.
Is it right? Is that it? Oh, I'm glad that we have this section. That was the whole smooth.
Yeah.
Smooth mod. No,
I was already thinking to add Matt's function into our website.
Definitely. But yeah, no, it's not floor. It's mod. Smooth mod. My bad.
Well, if you see in the tab that I've got open, see how I've got this trying to find a function that's doing this kind of smooth staircase. So what we kind of want to do is a function that
what Char wanted. So sorry, but
it is.
It's very similar. She was showing
the
same graphics.
Yeah, it's very
cool.
close.
Well, if you have that'd be awesome, because we basically want to do the AA step, but we want to just do the AA step where the edges meet, so that instead of it being a smooth staircase like this, which has this super smooth curve, or like this one has super smooth curve, we want the smoothness of that curve to be exactly one or 2 pixels, whatever the AA step gives us, so that it's perfectly anti-alias. And that's actually, I've been finding it's a bit tricky for me to figure it out. I have something which seems to work, and I will toss it up in my in the shader. So I'm going to just stop sharing here.
Okay, hold on.
And we'll see if it works as we want it to work. I don't know if it will or not. But
by the way, I send you, Matt, over on the chat, the function for Char, if you want.
Yeah, if you're curious. I can also paste it. I can paste it into the code, but I feel like that'll be confusing if we don't.
No, I want to.
Yeah.
Well, let's try yours
you can,
first.
Yeah, you can paste
and
it.
Then,
yeah.
If it doesn't work like you want, we can try Char's.
Yeah, sure. So we have this thing Angular here, which is the hard step value, and I'm just going to paste in the code that I have. I think it's the same, yeah. So the code I have, it does the first part of what we had before, which is to get the whole value, so the floor of these two things here. And I'm sort of considering this like interpolating from one frame to the next in a sequence of frames where each frame is discrete, and you want to have an interpolation just at the very edge of those things. And what I have is a mix function where it's going from the first value, so whatever this is, to the next one, which is this +1, and the +1 is going to be whatever the next color is, kind of. And this AA step thing, what it's doing is it's, instead of just being fract, which would give us something like this, what does it give us? It gives us just a smooth gradient. I'm using AA step at 0.5. And it kind of seems to work in that if you zoom in...
I see an error. Hold on.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't have one.
You don't see an error?
I'm not getting the... Well, I don't have the debugger.
I see the debugger.
I'm going to reload or something?
Really? Let me refresh. Also, Char's in the chat, just as we were talking about her, she popped in.
Cool.
She was like, no.
Hello, Char. Yeah.
Now
I see it.
Yeah, I can't replace a smooth floor.
Now I see it. Yeah, I see it. All good. I don't know what happened for a second.
Yeah. Funny. But now it's different. It's positioned differently for me. Oh, right.
I see somebody's really pumped for a smooth staircase, and
yeah.
I feel like they're going to be let down because we haven't figured it out.
Well, we can try.
Everything is an experiment. No, but yeah, so Shar was saying in the chat that it wouldn't replace a smooth floor. It's not quite the same thing.
Okay, right. I wasn't reading that.
It doesn't increment, which is what we would need.
Yeah. Like, I feel like I got very close to this, and this seems to work for this purpose, what I have here. And I'm not sure if one of these edges is aliased. When I'm looking at it, it looks okay.
Yeah,
but it could be that there's
fine,
an issue.
But it's so small that I cannot see anymore. So.
But my thinking was sort of that if we take the angular and we do fract angular times steps, we end up with this kind of these kind of
more
repeating
like a mirror
bands.
Thing. Yeah, I was gonna say.
And it's way easier to visualize this instead of visualizing it with HSVs. We just visualize the actual function, like the shape of the function with like a black and white again. And so my thinking was, because right here it's going from, and let's do less steps. Let's do like,
you could do the same thing that you did with the circle before, right? So that, because right now it's from 1 to the other h, like from 0 to 1, kind of.
Yeah, I was trying to do something like that, where you do like 2. Oh, sorry, what did I do before? I think I did abs.
Yeah, you did abs, and then
something like this, and then times 2. And this now we can, from this we can thinking. Like we can get a really thin AA step, which will give us like a perfect edge between each of these things. Now the problem though is that we don't really want it to go, we don't want it to go from 0 to 1 to 0. We want it, based on the way I'm doing it in my this above mix thing, we want it to go from 0 to 1 at each edge, kind of. I don't know how to explain it visually, kind of, but I feel like there is something here that's kind of, we're close to it. Because if you look at this, and then let's say I was to say if I was to do it's also sometimes easier, I find, to visualize it with smooth step, where you have like the threshold, which is 0.5, and the band width, or the glow value, which sometimes I was calling it glow, is some small value.
Oh, there it is, a little bit sharp, and you can at least one side.
And so this is kind of closer to what we want, where we have something, but there's still a problem where if I was to use this value, and then I have to somehow make it so that this value goes from, because it's always going from 0 to 1, 0 to 1, 0 to 1, and then the hue would always just go from, like, it wouldn't look like a color wheel anymore. Let's see what it looks like.
I think
It's like
it's
each of those slices
Oh, yeah.
is a color wheel.
like a mirror
And
thing.
so, yeah, we want like the whole thing. So maybe actually if we divide it by steps, I don't know. That makes sense? No.
No.
No. Anyways, the smooth staircase thing is a pain. Maybe somebody in the stream will will help.
Yeah, maybe.
But
I mean,
the
Charlie's
thing that I
here.
have above, yeah. Anyways, the thing I have up here seems to work okay.
Yeah.
For now.
Yeah.
So just leave it there.
Wow.
Okay, the next
Takes a
thing,
second. Yeah.
one more little thing we can do is just to take the circle here. Where is this filled circle? So we have filled circle, which is the fill color for the circle. Oh no, filled circle is the distance. So we're gonna do filled circle. We're just gonna cut off the inner part of the circle with another AA step because it's kind of nice, I find. What do we use? Radius? Radial.
Where is the radius?
Radius?
Radius
yeah, you had a radius function. You did
Radius,
have one.
yeah.
Yeah. I have radius, which
No,
is like
radial.
a size, and radial, which is like the radial distance from the center of the screen.
Cool. Oh, I like it with the
Yeah,
hole in the middle.
True.
Yeah, just like a little hole in the middle.
I was gonna scroll up so people can see the radial fluid
cool.
number, which was to kind of
Okay,
like
and then
to
one.
create a ring.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah,
No, I was
exactly.
gonna say that when you want to make a ring, that's how you would do it.
One other thing I'm going to do instead of just blending it on top is just like apply a multiply blend mode. So I'm going to do this.
How are you gonna do that? I'm curious.
So this is how I'm going to approach the multiply blending. Is you have one sort of composite, which is just the background color, and then one composite, which is a pure multiply of the two, and then you mask with the distance field sort of stuff that we've got going on.
Whoa.
Yeah,
That's how I'm going to approach that. And if you wanted it to be lower opacity, then you can just lower that and it'll go closer and closer to the background
I
color.
love this.
I love it.
Because probably I
So
would
that's
have
like
approached
multiply.
it differently and more complicated. Again, you
For
saved
sure.
me 2 steps already in my head
Definitely.
with the way that you're
Mhm.
showing off. Cool. Yeah.
And then the last little thing we could do, I guess, is just explore like OKLAB.
Yeah.
It's not very much different than what we have with HSV.
Oh, it would be cool
It's just
to
a
see
matter of
the tiny difference or something. So what I like so far of what you drew, even now, when you let like the grid to appear on top of the circle,
Yeah.
is that
It
really
makes
looks
it feel like hand drawn in.
exactly like print work, like really like you were like in a sketchbook, and you can never color sometimes the lines, right? So of a sketchbook. So.
Inside the lines.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of the nice thing with like shaders is like you can get really into like the little edges and the details. So like, for example, just something to show, we have this filled circle, which is like the distance field for the outer edge of the circle. And what we could do is make it so that it's like sketchy edge or something like that. And we can use a function, either a noise function or a random function. Maybe like a random function would be better, but let's just see what it looks like for now with like a sine function.
Yeah.
It has to be very small.
Yeah, probably.
And very high frequency. So the thing we're doing on the inside the sine function is going to be super high frequency.
Yeah.
And the thing we're going to do outside of it, this is the amplitude of the wave.
I'm obsessed.
That's going to be really, really low.
I actually love this instead of using like a random function because it's like you're just blending the space with what we have without making the. It's still like
goodness.
yeah, cool.
It makes me very happy. Yeah, this is really cool.
So if we imagine this is like painted on instead of just, you know, pure
Mm.
graphics, we can sort
Mm.
of imagine that the paint wouldn't have this perfect edge. And
Mm-hmm.
so right now it's a bit
Ah,
exaggerated.
that's why you
The
wanted the
sign,
random. Mm.
yeah, we could use noise as well. Noise is really good for this, but
Mm.
right now
Oh, that's
what we
cool. Yeah,
have
just
is
a little bit off. Yeah.
yeah, so we have this high frequency or
Mm.
high-ish frequency, medium high frequency
Mm.
sine wave with a really low amplitude. And what we're going
Mm.
to do is we're going to create multiple stacks of these at different basically opacities, you can think of it as. And each stack is going to have a different frequency,
Ah,
maybe
okay.
different
This is kind of like
amplitude.
Sean's tip when
Mm-hmm.
when
Absolutely.
Sean Sommer was here on Curiously Minded. He
Cool.
had a technique similar to this to do like blobs
Yeah.
in ray
Nice.
marching. That of course like the blob appears to be random, right? So you just like it's very much the same.
That's so cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
now it looks like a brush or something, you
Yeah.
know? So because it's like
Or like a
fine,
stamp.
or
You know,
yeah,
when you like
true,
stamp and you
true,
have the like edges. Yeah.
yeah, or a brush.
So I'm just sort of playing around here. I don't
Yeah,
really
yeah,
have
yeah.
any idea what I'm doing, but you can sort of layer up these different sine waves, and right now I'm doing
Mm,
cos for the x-axis,
mm,
sine for
Mm.
the y-axis.
mm,
Um, I think a noise function would be better
mm-hmm.
than what I'm doing here because you'd actually get like sort of the movement of these waves would not be in like one or the other direction. It would be kind of in all directions. But
I
just for the
have a,
sake of example,
yeah.
it's kind of cool.
I mean, I have a noise function that I can put on top if we want to.
Yeah, that would be cool if you could just drop it in.
Let me put it here. It's from that gist from Patricio. So it's up there. It's a
We also
float.
have cheap noise from uh
Do
oh
you
my
see
goodness,
it? I
now
put
I'm
it in
blanking.
line 57, 60.
57,
57.
57.
Oh yeah,
That's a
that's a
random, and
random
then the
function. But what
noise.
we need is more. Oh yeah, then the noise is below it. Oh nice. That's a really small
Or do
noise
you want a
function.
noise for a vector 2 inside? Because I have as well a noise for.
Um, yeah, I think I needed vector 2 noise,
So then let me put
two-dimensional
that one.
noise.
Yeah, because there were two.
Cool.
But hold
Oh,
on,
that's great.
when we put both, Copen doesn't. I
Yeah.
think there's an error, so we have to just keep the one that
Do you
we're
know
using.
whether this goes between 0 and 1 or negative
No,
1
wait a
and 1?
second. I still see like an error. Do you see an
Mm.
error?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me think. Where's the error? Is it because
I can't see the bottom part.
Hold
Oh,
on,
it's
it's because I
different.
put this. I
Mhm.
always forget. What's that?
Is it
What am I
moves that
missing?
floor? D.
Oh, I know what it is. I need to use this other one. Give me a moment. Don't type anything so that I make sure that we don't. Yeah, now we have the noise with the vector 2. Yeah.
Cool. And do you know if it's a negative 1 to 1 or 0 to 1?
That is that I don't know.
Okay. Let's figure
Oh,
it out.
thank you,
So,
𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. He just remembered I was saying, where do we have the cheap noise function from? Because we had this other noise function, but it's
𝗏
𝗏𝗏.
Rosema?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, why can't I remember the name? Ooh, this is nice.
Oh, yeah, it's already like you said random.
Ooh, I like it. Yeah.
Now it
Cool.
looks like Pollock or something.
Mhm.
It's coming to the sketch and
I'm going to assume it goes from negative 1 to 1.
yeah.
So,
How can we discover that quickly, by the way?
we could put a noise function in the debug. So, noise uv.xy. And then we can just scale it to see.
Oh, okay.
It seems to me that it's
Mm.
going from pure black to pure white. And what we could try and do is if we go from negative 1 to 1, 0 to 1.
Ah,
Yeah, so
okay.
now it's
That's
too
what you
white.
meant.
So this little
Okay,
thing
okay,
that I
okay,
do
okay.
here, it just takes it from negative 1 to 1 to 0 to 1.
Okay.
But if it's already 0 to 1, it's just going to end up bright.
Yeah.
So I think it is between negative 1
And
and
one.
1 because this is the inverse, which is too dark. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's too
So I'm gonna just assume it's already in negative 1 to 1 space, which is good.
Yeah.
That's what we want. Same with the sine function. It goes from -1 to 1. That's kind of what we were using
Yeah.
before.
I'm thinking maybe it
So
is
I'm going to
because
just,
this case from Patricia, I think normally goes from -1 to 1. It could be that I'm wrong, but yeah.
Nice. So I'll just do a couple of these, like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Just this is like a phase shift, you can call it, just so that they don't all have the same x and y coordinates, and then maybe just a slightly different frequency. So let's just say we'll do like one frequency that's like a really low value there, and it just like maybe not that low, but it's a low frequency so that it distorts the circle a little bit, so that it's not like a perfect circle. But we're gonna lower the amplitude so that it's like a very gentle effect.
I love
And then
that.
we'll do another one that's a high frequency, and we'll sort of mix that in so that it's just like now we're not modifying the distortion of the circle, we're just modifying like the little ripple edges just for like a little extra detail. And what we could even do is we could layer up these shapes. So right now, this is being applied as a single layer. And so one way we could layer this up is we could like, might have to restructure the code a bit. Maybe we won't do it now, but or actually maybe we wouldn't need to do too much here. Let me just see.
Do you just want to add a second layer on it, or?
Yeah, so
I mean, you can just copy. Yeah, I was gonna suggest for now, like, just I would do the same.
And each of these has to be.
And you're gonna kind of offset one of them, or what's the idea behind
Yeah, so if they both have different noise values, maybe in theory, I don't know if this will actually work or not. Let's just see. We're just experimenting. And let me just make it exaggerated to get a sense. Yeah, so what you're seeing now is this two-layer effect. Yeah. If you
and
zoom in, you'll see
it
it
has
especially.
more contrast, and the other one less, kind of to have this melty effect.
Yeah,
like
and this is really good for like
glaze or something.
Yeah, it's basically like if we don't do the second one, it's just that we're layering up these different layers with lower opacities, and we're layering these two layers with 50% each. We could do 3 layers with 33% each, and then what we would end up with is 3 layers.
I love to play with those like op art effects when I do shaders, like basically using the same shape and then just like offsetting it a bit, and pretty nice.
Yeah. And so the goal with what I'm doing here is to just make it so that it's really slightly sort of painted looking.
Yeah.
And so just to give the edge a little something, and just I'm going to turn it way down because it's
when you paint with this how do you say it, aquarellas in English?
Oh, that's a good question. I was about to say it in French.
I know in
I
Spanish.
have no idea. Aquarelle. How do you say aquarelle in English? Aquarelle.
Because when you paint with that, do you know it's kind of that effect that Matt is doing.
Is that watercolor? Yeah, it's watercolor.
Watercolor. Yeah, that's what I meant. Like when you play with those on paper, it looks sometimes
they
like
bleed
this.
into each other.
Yeah. Like sometimes it's like this.
I'm just gonna gentle reminder that we're at the 2-hour mark.
Yeah.
So I don't want to take up all your time. I also have an appointment later, but I also want to get to that special color thing that you were talking about, if you want to.
Well, that's a quick drop in.
Okay.
So I have some code, and let me just paste it in.
Cool.
Yeah.
Because all we're going to do really is change. So I already have the code pasted in, actually. I pasted it in a while back. So it's this OKLAB.
Up there?
I think I saw it at the top, no?
There's a couple of them. There's one that's OKLAB to RGB, and there's one that's OKLCH to RGB.
Okay.
So LAB color space. LAB is lightness, and then AB are the two like chromaticity, like / like color properties. And it's a kind of weird color space to work in, but usually for like the sake of art and stuff like that, I like to work in cylindrical coordinates, which is this lch space where L is the lightness, C is chromaticity or like saturation, and then H is the hue. So I'm just going to use this function instead of the hue function. Where is this? So instead of the HSV,
yeah. Where was that? I'm lost now. It was quite.
So it's
at bottom.
151 now is where we are. And I'm gonna, and it's LCH. So first is lightness, next is chroma, and next is the angular hue. And it's a bit of a weird, I'm almost wondering if the GLSL code might be a little
saturated, right?
Yeah,
So, like more
Interesting.
it's very saturated, and it's a little weirder and harder to like work with, I find.
Yeah.
Like
so dark.
Yeah,
It
so
is.
like
It's very like a little somber in tone.
Yeah, exactly.
So here, if we increase the chroma and
some of the colors start blending in, actually, like those red and purple is almost.
It's kind of like when you use markers on paper and they like really bleed into the paper, you know? I don't know if you know what I mean. Like there's sometimes you can color on paper and it doesn't do that, and then other markers are just like too intense with the ink.
True.
Kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah.
I also
even
feel like there's sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say even one of the colors here like almost fades completely away the lines for me. One of the reds, but everyone else
definitely.
And the blue too. So cool.
It also might be that there's a bug somewhere, because I don't see any like yellow and stuff.
True.
Oh, okay.
So
was there supposed to be a yellow? I even forgot about the yellow.
I mean, there was a yellow with the HSV, wasn't there?
We can comment.
I think so.
That. I don't remember now, actually. So
I don't know. Yeah, let me just
comment it back, because you put it in line 150. So was there a yellow really? Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
An orange. Yeah, I totally forgot.
Yeah.
They even disappear.
It gets like gobbled up by.
Okay.
Yeah, I almost wonder if there's a bug with the GLSL code I'm using here. Because usually I've been finding that OKLAB is pretty cool for like doing these kind of an alternative to HSV, but it could be that there's a bug in the code that I'm using.
Because normally it wouldn't like make the other colors disappear like that.
Disappear.
Well, I wouldn't have thought so. I wouldn't have thought so.
Oh,
but
okay. Yeah.
I don't know. It could also just, maybe this is just the way it works. But what it should be giving us, and it's maybe not a great example of it all, but what it should be giving us is that when we use a lightness like 0.3, all the colors in the spectrum should have a constant perceptual lightness to them. So they are all the same lightness, no matter which like
maybe that's why we have the
here.
feeling that they're oversaturated, because all of them are trying to
meet each other at this
in
the same
exactly at the same.
So interesting.
By the way, somebody asked in the chat, what's the difference between HSV and this
they just put someone just posted the link from earlier.
That again? Oh, okay, okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
LCH and HSV. So somebody's asking LCH. So there's when we talk about lab color spaces, it's like a common color space that people will use for like perceptually uniform spaces. And LAB are the three components. So L is always the lightness, but then AB is this coordinate. I guess it's I don't remember what it represents. It's like some sort of coordinate, but the way I always do this is to convert into LCH, or to use LCH and convert it into LAB, because LCH gives you the ability to specify chroma, like saturation, independently of the hue. So that's kind of where LCH is. And I think in OKLAB he might have, in like that blog post, he might have specified like the difference between the cylindrical and the.
Yeah, we linked it again. I want to check it out as well later. So because it sounds very interesting to me.
Cool.
Oh, I'm so happy
Awesome.
with everything that you taught us
So
today,
so
Matt.
many new things that I've learned. I'm
Yeah,
like, I'm gonna
yeah,
need to rewatch this and
yeah. I truly,
take it
truly
all in a
enjoy it.
second time, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Me
cool.
too. Me too. Thank you so much for like
Yeah.
enlightening us with all of these like fine details, I would say, in concepting and designing
Yeah.
and color theory as well. So I think a lot
Thanks for having me.
of viewers that are more on the programming side are very appreciative of, you know, learning about
Yeah.
what can I do when I do shaders, like how do I come up with ideas, like, or how do I even know like the mix of the colors that I'm using. So I think
Just like, yeah,
you
how to
gave a
think
lot
about
of
approaching
tips.
all of these things. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
don't know if you guys saw in the chat throughout this whole conversation, but everyone was like, wow, this is amazing. Everyone's really into all of these fine details, as you like to call them. Yeah.
Mm.
So,
Cool. That's good.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you
Means
so much,
everybody's
Matt.
graphics are going to be nicely anti-aliased. That's what I
Yeah.
expect to see.
So lastly, do you have anything coming up, Matt? Like, I mean, sometimes you teach, or sometimes maybe you have something,
So we were
an
talking
exciting
before we
project
went, yeah, we were talking
that you want
before
to
we went
mention.
live about Wayfinder.
Do you want to
hmm
mention that
And
or
so
tell
it's,
the people? Mm?
yeah, do you want to tell people about that? Because I know you said it was coming out soon in the App Store on iOS
Yeah.
and Android.
So Wayfinder's already been released on the browser for a
Yeah.
little while ago.
And it's amazing and everyone should
I
try
can
it. It's
put
a
the link.
beautiful game. Absolutely
Yeah.
beautiful.
Thanks.
Oh, and you did it with the NFB. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, with
That's
National
extra
Film
fun.
Board of
That's the
Canada. Yeah.
National Film Board. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah,
Wait,
they
where's
were
the
the
chat?
producer on it.
Awesome.
And that was a really fun project. And it's like been this like massive undertaking where it was like mostly my code, but I brought in like some other amazing developers and designers, and it was illustrated by this like fantastic illustrator, Tiffany, and Guillaume was the one doing the 3D modeling, and then we had Jelani doing development, and all the credits there are in the info. And William Mapen also came in at the end and like helped with some of the cinematic sort of aspects to the creative coding and like little details like the fox and things like that. Um, and so yeah, it was this massive project, and it's running in the browser, but we also wanted to deploy it on the App Store. And so I've been exploring like using just iOS App Store, not Android, sadly, but
Okay.
um, we used ionic capacitor to wrap it up into an app, and it was a fairly smooth process. There was a few little things here and there, but we just finally launched it this week, and it's now in the App Store. And the main reason we wanted it there is just to put it on like a different channel
Yeah.
for people to
Yeah,
find, because
of
not everyone's going on
course.
the web. And also there might be an opportunity like Apple might
Feature it.
share it or something like
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah, it's a
yeah,
very
today
cool
I think we're
little
launching it
game.
basically today or tomorrow.
Today.
So
Ooh, that's cool. I didn't
mhm.
realize.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah.
congratulations.
So
Yeah.
we will all check it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Um, are you, because you have, sometimes you give workshops and stuff. Are you doing
Mm.
that? I mean, I guess not for before Christmas, but like, are you doing that in the new year?
I'll probably do some next year. I haven't really figured it out. I just took a little pause from doing some like major public speaking and like
Yeah.
big workshop stuff, um, just to like clear my space a bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And mostly the last few months I've been like pretty heads down on like art stuff, like
For sure.
lots of
Mm.
NFTs and things like that.
Definitely.
And then yeah, so I'll probably do some public speaking at some point next year, but I don't know yet.
No
Maybe
big
later in the
plans.
year or something like that. Um, and then I'm also just gonna do some own like self-initiated stuff the next couple months. Like, well,
That's
one of the things
exciting.
I'm doing prints for one of the projects I did recently in Meridian,
Cool.
and that's
Yeah. Yeah.
been taking a lot of my time where I'm doing these massive prints, and
It's
it's
beautiful.
like
Mm-mm.
thanks. So it's like 150 centimeters tall, and most of the prints are that big.
Mm.
And so it's just been this like interesting process of like making sure that the code can produce this kind of nice output, and
Mm.
then also just making sure that the prints are like good quality and like the right printer, and finding the right studio to work with to actually get them all shipped. And that's just been like a ton of work to like facilitate all the like
Yeah.
fulfillments and like um and all of that. And then yeah, the next thing I'll probably be working on is either a bit of pen plotter stuff because I actually just bought some nice graph paper, which is part of the reason why I'm doing like graph paper related stuff today. And it's going to be arriving soon. It's like this vintage graph paper, and I want to use it as like a base for some pen plotter work.
So fun.
And then the other thing I'll probably be exploring, which I've been sort of exploring a while now, is doing some smart contract based art projects where it's not so much of an NFT, but it's more like exploring smart contracts for collaborative editing of like an art related project. So just using the blockchain as a way of like using it as a database sort of rather than using it always as like a NFT. That's kind of just something I've been thinking about, but haven't really fully formed how it's all going to work. So it's just on the back burner.
Yeah,
so many things always. And I was going to say, actually, if people are curious or feel slightly overwhelmed by all of the NFT stuff, Matt is a wonderful person to follow because he's always synthesizing kind of like things and commenting on everything that's happening in a way that I personally find extremely digestible. Like I find it really helpful because or else everything moves really fast all the time. So recommend if you're not already following
the link, by the way, of your Twitter with your beautiful meridian prints so that people, like if maybe they haven't checked it out, it was in one of your tweets.
Thanks.
So
yeah, it's on. I have a link. It's like there's a shop.mattdeslau.com, and all of the proceeds for these prints are going the net proceeds after the expenses of actually the printing process and things like that. It's going towards a nonprofit in the UK that is aiming to improve and like protect and basically champion for green spaces and parks across the UK, just to help make sure that those are well kept and maintained and public and accessible and things like that.
Oh, cool. I just linked that into the chat and put it on the screen. Your shop, mattdes.com. That's the one you meant, right? So the one that I have in the screen right now?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, beautiful art. Well, thank you so much then again.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out with us and teaching us so much. And thank you for everyone in the chat as well.
And I guess we should tell the people in the chat that this was the last stream of the year.
Not of the season, just of 2021.
Just like now
we'll
time off for
January.
the holidays.
Yeah.
And we're going to be back in
We'll
January.
Be back soon.
Yeah.
We'll send out a newsletter.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
And then we'll yell it out on all of our socials as well.
I will give a small shout out just for the people that is watching, and I will put on screen that actually we already have like a person coming up next that in the beginning of January, and that's 𝗻𝗲𝗀𝗀. So
true. Okay.
Really
I totally forgot we could announce it already.
Yeah.
So excited.
We have her confirmed, and she has done like beautiful work, installation work mostly, work for Mion Wolf. And we look forward to as well, like see how her process is.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. All right, so then happy holidays, everybody.
So happy holidays, everybody. Thank you again, Matt.
Yeah,
thanks for having me. This was really fun.
Let's say goodbye to the stream.
Bye, everybody.
See you.
Bye.